Okay, so far a small group. Good morning. Tuba of the
Good
15th
morning.
of
Good morning, Avi.
15th. Hi,
This,
Aviva.
hi, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But I don't know much more about Chomsky than what I mentioned to you. So I just
Okay.
and
Okay.
also, are you still recording?
We're recording right now. Yeah.
But he'll edit it, right?
No, we're not editing. This is what
Okay.
this is. If you want to talk unedited, we'll talk after.
Okay, fine. All right. So I'm
Okay.
going to have to leave the meeting, but thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Unusually small group. Oh, here comes Rivki. Rivki's coming in. Okay. So we'll start with Hayom Yom today. Today is a big day. Today's the 15th of Av. Now, every month has a 15th, a full moon. So what's the big deal? This one. So the Frierdiker Rebbe explains, and he explains from his father's notes. That's what he starts, my father's notes, the Rebbe Rashav's notes. The superior quality of the 15th of Av over the 15th of every other month, right? Every other month, the moon wanes and waxes, and on the 15th it's full. What's the difference on the 15th of Av? So the 15th of this month in general, of the month in general, in any 15th of the month, represents only the complete wholeness of the moon's revelation, right? Full moon, which has to do with visibility, how much of the moon you will see. You'll see the fullness of it. But it is only a recipient of light from the sun. It's a reflector. It's taking in light from the sun. However, on the 15th of Av, the light is firmly fixed in it. Now, I don't believe that he's talking about a change in the physicality. He's talking about, as he's about to say, there's a principle. The principle in Hebrew is written, Yorida Sorech Aliyah. The descent is for the sake of the revelation. So in this case, the descent has been extremely deep. Remember, Tisha B'Av, the destructions of both temples, the exiles. And so the ascent, now I'm back reading, is in reverse proportion to the dramatic descent of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av was a darkness greater than any other darkness because, again, we had light, we had a temple. When you have a temple and two temples, and they're destroyed, when the light is removed, when the lights go out, having been there in the first place, there's a darkness, that a pronouncedness of the darkness that wasn't there even when there was a previous light. When the lights go out, you feel it very deeply. So then when the lights come back on, i.e. the 15th of the month of Av, that disproportion and that radical change from the pit of darkness to the fullness of the moon has a quality, and he's saying here really a quality of light which doesn't exist on any other 15th of any, which doesn't exist on the 15th of any other month. Back inside. This then is the meaning of the sun's power is weakened on the 15th of Av. And this is a fact that the heat of summertime begins to be less intense after the 15th of the month. We're experiencing this now very much upcountry, upstate. The whole sky has changed. All summer long, I don't know how many of you here are in places where you can see the sky, but the sky has changed all summer long. Besides the fires that have been masking the clearness of the sky from the fires from Canada, the quality of the sky is now much crisper. If you look at on an Elul kind, it's an Elul kind of a month, which starts changing after Tisha B'Av. The quality of the atmosphere changes. The quality of the light of the full moon is much crisper. The stars are much more visible. And that's the winds of Elul. Blows away the heat and the oppressiveness of the summer, and things begin to change. So this then is the meaning of the sun's power is weakened. even though there are hot days in August, in general, the whole movement is that the sun is weakening from its intensity that it had been building and until until Tisha B'Av, which was, we're going to see what the heat of this intensity of the sun means on Tisha B'Av. If the fact is, the idolaters calculate their calendar by the sun of evil. Sun here, the sun in the sky. Just interesting to note, I don't know if there's any connection, but the name of the Egyptian sun god, his name was Ra, which in Hebrew means evil. Don't know if there's any linguistic connection, but certainly that B'Hashgacha Pratis, it is connected. The idolaters calculate their calendar by the sun of evil. The sun, of course, gives light, but there's the opposite side, which the sun burns. The sun has an intensity. The sun makes itself very pronouncedly known. The sun is, in that respect, full of itself, full of gaiva, which is the opposite of humility. The moon, on the other hand, is the tachlis, the ultimate of humility. It's totally open to receive. So in the days of the sanctuary, that is the Mishkan in the desert, the nations were subservient to Shlomo, King Solomon. Yeah, I'm not sure why it says the sanctuary. Did you say the Mishkan? I'm looking for it. Bisman HaBayis. No, it's interesting. He's talking about the temple. Bisman HaBayis, it says in Hebrew. In the time of the temple. I'm not sure why it says the sanctuary. It means a temple. In the days of the temple, the nations were subservient to Shlomo, King Solomon. Certainly it shall be so in the time to come, when the nations will flow to him. All the nations will flow to God, to Jerusalem, to the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash will become the house of prayer for all nations. In a state, all the nations will come to him in a state of total bittul, which is the moon. The total bittul, total receptivity of the moon. The ultimate of which is expressed on Tu B'Av by means of the contrast between the time before, when the sun was prevailing, and the time now when the moon is prevailing. And in that time, in the future, in that time of ultimate receptivity, I would say, it says, I will remove the spirit of impurity. And a token of this is expressed on the 15th of Av, when the sun is weakened and the moon is strengthened. We are moon people, Jewish people, moonies. But our particular characteristic, amongst which there are others, but compassion comes from receptivity to other people. And the opposite of it is preponderance of one's self, one's ego. And the former is the moon quality, receptivity, and the other is a sun quality. Okay, sun and moon, lessons in Tanya. Back to our story on page 80. What is our story, right? What is our story? The story is a story of manifesting the name of God, manifesting the Yud Kei Vav Kei in everything that we do, bringing, as Zvi Freeman, I think it was, titled his book, Bringing Heaven Down to Earth. Maybe I have the wrong author. That is a title, Bringing Heaven Down to Earth. And the way Hashem brings heaven down to earth, or brings himself down to this lower level, is through the letters of his name. He manifests his chokhmah, his wisdom, in the letter Yud, his bina, which chokhmah gives to bina, the wisdom comes to understanding and internalization, which is the hey. And then the vav brings it down 6 levels of midos, from chesed to yesod. And then the latter hey expresses his kingdom throughout the creation, but particularly his kingdom here on earth, which is the tachlis, the end game, the bottom and the purpose of all of the creation. So the name is a pictogram of God unraveling or unrolling or exposing himself from essence down to this physical world. So that's what we're talking about, the name. We are in, where did I say we are here? On page 214. Yeah, 214, in the middle of the page. Now, the Alter Rebbe had told us, a saying from Chazal, from our sages, Beyud Nivra Olam Haba, with the Yud, he created the future world, the world to come, and with the Hey, he created this world. Being Hagam Shehei Tato. Now there are two Heys in Hashem's name, right? The first Hey and the second Hey, the one before the Vav and after the Vav. When this expression was used, with the Hey, he created this world, that refers to the lower Hey. The lower Hey is God's Malchus, the instantiation of his kingdom, the Hey Acharena, right? And remember, or don't remember, or let me tell you if you don't remember, that one of the ways that the Kabbalah expresses Malchus is the organ of the mouth. Malchus is often pictorialized in the hierarchy of spirits as the bottom, like the feet, Ragle HaShechina, the feet of the Shekhinah, but it's also the mouth, because the mouth is what God, the figurative mouth is what God used to create. He created with speech, right? V'yayma v'yahi, he said, and things come into being. So that's the second Hey, Malchus. So he says, Hagam Shehei, that this Hey, where it says, with the Hey he created this world, refers to the Hey Acharayna, which is Malchus, the second Hey of the Shem Havaya. Virazal Dorshu Zeh, and our sages have interpreted this to mean, to go on the pasuk, Ki B'Yud Kei. It says, B'Yud Kei Tzur Elomim. With the Yud and the Hey, he created all worlds. Ainu Lefi, now that Yud Kei is the first, the Yud goes with the first Hey. Vav goes with the second Hey. So which is it? Well, it's both. The instantiation of creativity is through speech, which is Malchus the second. But the source of that, and now we go inside, the source of that speech and its root, its source and its head, to come to revelation, from the concealment of the Yud, that comes from the upper Hey. So the upper Hey, let's go. Chochmah gives to Bina, but Chochmah is just the Yud, meaning it's beyond description. It has nothing to say about itself. It's just a point, and that point is a instantiation of everything which is beyond understanding. To come to understanding, Hey, that which is beyond understanding flows into understanding in Bina. Bina is understanding. And Bina is the source of things which are ultimately going to be tangible. However, Bina isn't the proximate source of it, the nearby source. It's not the immediate source. It goes through channels until, which is the Vav, until those channels manifest in the Hey, which is the proximate source, the organ of speech, which actually brings things, the whole entirety of creation, into being, into actual substance and instantiation. So the source of all of that is the Hey Eloah, the first Hey. And it indicates that is the first Hey indicates it being the source of all materialization, instantiation, bringing things into substantiality, from the fact that it has length and it has breadth. That's the whole of creation. Infinitely deep and infinitely wide instances of actuality. So the Hey has length and width. The Hayres, which shows al bechinas Bina, which shows on the category and the level of things called Bina. Bina is understanding, where you take the flash of insight, which is also a flash, a dot of insight, and elaborate upon it and bring it into understanding. That's Bina. So Bina is, even though it's internal, right? It's not Malchus, the words coming out of your mouth, which are external. It has the shape inside, internally, of that which will come out externally. that is breadth and width, space, time, etc. So Bina, this shape of Bina indicates this notion of being a source for space, time, and multiplicity, for length and breadth and actuality. And Bina indicates that because it's the first level where there is some kind of flow from the concealment of Seichel. Using the model that we've talked about before from Freud, the preconscious, the subconscious gives rise to the preconscious gives rise to the conscious, and then the conscious mind expresses. So there are layers, but these are just 4 levels, right? Preconscious, subconscious, preconscious, conscious, and then the actual expression. These are just 4 levels, well, happen to correspond, I don't know, I doubt, well, whether he thought about this or not is irrelevant, but there are 4 layers in that structure: unconscious, preconscious, conscious, and then expression. And that's what we're talking about here. And the unconscious, we'll call that roughly Chokhmah, something about you can say nothing about, gives rise to the preconscious, where things are beginning to take place in your consciousness, and that's, roughly speaking, Bina. And that Bina is called Seichel Hanelam. It brings the Bina. Shehi hispashtis of Seichel Hanelam. Bina is the hispashtis, of the hidden levels of intellect. Bebechinas Giloy, in a manner of revelation. V'hasaga, and grasping things. And grasping things. V'hachover sadas, with the breadth of knowledge and understanding. Uv'hashposa, and in its flow, the flow of Bina, Bina actually mistayemes, it culminates from the mental faculty of Bina in the heart. Well, Kamasha Kosev is written, B'tikunim is written in the Zohar, the Bina Liba. Bina is the heart, and with Bina, the heart comes to understand. So in Hasidus, it's not just a poetic expression. Excuse me, that's something stuck in my throat. It's not just a poetic expression, the understanding heart. The heart is an organ of understanding. It's reflected and contains Bina, and it's the maturation of Bina in the heart. It's the place where Bina concludes, mistayemes. Umisham, and then from the heart, Yetze HaHevel, comes the breath. Now we've talked about this before. The heart is. Pardon me?
Can you just do a clarification on that last statement you made, that the something about the clarification of the heart?
Not the clarification. Mistayemes. Look inside. I hope you look inside. The word is mistayemes. It culminates. Bina, understanding, culminates. Mistayemes, belev, in the heart. That's the word. That's what the Alter Rebbe is saying. The flow from Bina culminates in the heart. And I'll just repeat this. Because it is written, but the Kunim in the Zohar, the Bina Liba. The Zohar says Bina is the heart, and the Zohar continues, Ubohaled Mevin. And with that, the heart comes to understand. Umishum, and from the heart, the understanding heart, Yetze HaHevel. Now we're back to the physiology. From the heart is the source of the heat. The blood has warmth in it, right? And that blood, that heat, flows up into the windpipe, into the breath, which is the Makar Gili Guf HaOisis, which the windpipe is the source of all the letters. So if you're following this, Chokhmah, let's take it in God's terms. God's wisdom flows into his faculty of Bina. That's Yud K, right? Then flows down through all the midos, right? Flows through all the midos. Tiferes is usually the heart, right here, of the midos, right? And Chokhmah encapsulates itself in Bina. Bina in the midos, the central one is the heart. The heart, now, with its encapsulation of Chokhmah distilled into Bina, pumps warmth up the windpipe, And windpipe is the source of dibur back inside the letters of speech. Hamizgalis behemotsois mehelim, and which give rise to the externalization of all of that through the he motsois hapeh, which is malchus. Right? Malchus is the peh. That Zohar also says, malchus peh. Malchus is the mouth. Torah shel bal peh. It's the oral Torah, the mouthpiece of Hashem, where Hashem's allness is encapsulated in his wisdom, flows to understanding, and is expressed in the Torah. Or in what we're speaking about, is expressed in creation through the organ of speech through which God creates everything. From the from the 5 articulated powers of the mouth. And again, the number 5, that's the second hay. And that's the process by which godliness expresses itself and reveals itself back inside, mehahelam hayud, from the concealment of the point, the dot, the yud. The tamuna heitata, the tamunas heitata, in the shape of the heitata, the second hay, the kasivasa, as that hay is written, Gam came to his pashtus orech v'roichem. We've been speaking about this. The hay has length and width, and it also has a little opening to speak. I mean, he's not saying that, but that's brought in my Morim about Pesach. The difference between the ches and the hay. The ches also has length and width, but it has no opening. So the ches is a symbol of self-grandness, grandeur, of holding oneself to be something that it's associated with chometz. Chometz, right? Chometz is bread, leaven, which leaven is a metaphor in all the Memorim of Pesach for self-aggrandizement, raising yourself up. The difference between chometz and matzah is just 2 letters are the same, mem and sadik. The difference is between the ches and the hay, right? Chometz, matzah, and the hay has an opening. And that opening is 2-way street. It's an opening for God, for godliness to be expressed, and it's an opening in a channel for us to relate to God as well. So that's the letter hay. The hay has length and width and an opening, which he doesn't focus here on the opening. He's focusing here on the fact that the hay is the pictorial instantiation of length and width, which is the tangibility, the actualization of creation. So the letter hay has length and width, which shows al hispashtus, on the flow of Bechinas Malchusai, of his blessed kingdom. Malchus kol olamim, it says. Malchus, your kingdom, which is Shechina, which is hay, is the kingdom of all worlds, because it's the source of all worlds. Lamaila ulamata, all worlds above and below, meaning from Atzilus on down, uladalit sitrin, and to the 4 dimensions. Right? This is Hashem Echad. Those of you we were talking earlier about the Hashem Echad. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The word Echad, he is one, which is the Aleph, in the 7 heavens and the earth, which is the vertical. 7 heavens and the earth is 8, and the Dalet Sitrin, the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west, which are the horizontal. So that's the secret of how the Yud, Hashem's essence, distilled essence, comes into the hay, so that the essence is now taking shape, and that shape becomes a source for the tangible shape of all of creation through God's mouth, so to speak, which is the second hay. So the flow flows down from at the lowest level into all 4 directions, Dalet Sitrin, which flow out from the speech, the letters of the speech of God, Devar Hashem. The Meshikosev is written Koheles, Asher daber melech hasholton. As the king speaks, so he rules. Is written in another place. This is a bracket now. To understand a little bit of what is the essence of these letters of speech, the elokus, as it pertains to godliness, she'ein le demus haguf, which God has no body, yet what we've been doing here is totally anthropomorphizing him, with permission, by the way. I mean, some people, when we've learned this, Tanya, with people who've started, they say, well, isn't this anthropomorphism? Yes, well, it is, but you should know that the Torah gives permission to anthropomorphize. It says that, and we mentioned this before, the pasuk in Eov, Job says, "For my flesh I can see godliness." God gives us permission, since we're created in his image, to apply the structure of ourselves to him in order to have some understanding, some grasp of how godliness works and how God intends himself to be brought into actualization. And now we're exploring it through the metaphor of speech. Just as my potential is somewhere in my consciousness, the letter Yud, that potential is meant, each and every one of us, to come into actualization. And that comes through a process, from potential to mentalization, to thought, speech, and action. So very similarly, as we unroll ourselves, so to speak, from potential to actual, metaphorically, God does the same thing, because we're made in his image. So, but to understand this, he says a little bit how this metaphor of speech applies to God. God has no body, v'lei hanefesh, and he doesn't have a soul like we have a soul, has v'sholem. So how to understand that? He wants us to look back to where we already came from in this Kavarnas Bar. This has already been explained, in a brief, in a long and a short way, in the second part of Tanya, L'Kuti Amorim Chelik Beis, Shahar Yichud V'Emunin, Perek Yud Aleph and Perek Yud Beis, Ayin Shom. See over there. Well, we will see over there the next time the Tanya comes around again. But he explained that at length over there. That La'olam, based on the pasuk, La'olam from Tillim, La'olam Hashem devarach nitza b'shemayim. Forever Hashem, your word stands in the heaven. And there is where he first, in Tanya at least, began this explication of language as a metaphor for God, what I call unrolling, expressing himself. All right, that's today's Tanya. Questions, comments?
Yes, I'd like to go back to the hay.
Back to the hay.
So there are, or forward to the hay. So there are two levels of Bina, correct?
No, there's one level of Bina, that's the first hay.
Yeah.
Then there's another hay, which is Malchus. Two hays, there are two hays. One is Bina, one is Malchus. They're connected, obviously, they're the same letter, because Malchus is speech, which is the actualization of understanding, which is the first Bina. Bina is understanding. So what you understand becomes a driver for what you're going to speak. Bina is a driver for Malchus. The Var Melech Sholta, the word of the king rules. The actual rulership is Devar, is speech. But where does that speech come from? Well, there are various levels, but when you're asking about the two hays, the source of speech is in understanding, in Bina.
Okay, I'll have to do my
Got
homework
it?
and get.
No, you got it. Do you have?
What you're saying, but there's a different Vort in Chassidus about
What?
that there is two levels of understanding. One is intellectual and one is Bina Liba, as you referred to. So I was going to ask a question about First, I'll bring you the information.
There are levels, sure, there are levels in understanding. But here this is not what we're speaking about here on this page. We're speaking about understanding and speech, and how speech is brought forth from understanding. You're not going to talk about something that you have no understanding, unless you babble. And that's what's here on the page. Certainly, there are levels in everything. You know, we've talked about this yesterday, you know, on the structure of panemius and chitzonius. You know, you could say speech is a chitzonius, an external expression of something which is more panemius, which is bina. But really, there's a whole bunch of stuff in between, isn't there? They're all the midos. So the proximate source of speech is the midos, and the midos derive from bina. So there's a lot more to be said, of course, you know, in different pages of Hasidus. Point is, you have to see that they don't contradict each other. They're just looking at it from different angles.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else? This chitzonius, this notion of externality and internality is very, I mean, it's replete with lots of meaning, because an example of this is that's given is an onion. If you have an onion, right, the outside, the chutz, the outside, is the first layer. You peel away that layer, and now the layer which was inside the bifnim is now the outside. So if you can imagine peeling, this is the outside. Yeah, sure, it's the outside. Once I peel it away, what was inside is now the outside, and I peel that away, and what was outside is now inside. And this is an infinite regression. So you have to know where you're holding, so as they say, bimin where you're holding in the Hasidus that you're learning, and take it that way, even though you know that in other places it's expressed a different way. Okay.
Quick question, Avi. You
Yeah.
said in terms of that it starts in Bina and then comes out of Malchus, but then
Yeah.
so all the other Sfirot in between?
Yeah, it goes through all the other. That's what I said. He's not discussing the progression. The actual progression is from Bina to Midos, to the Vav, right?
Right.
But he's not focusing on that. He's focusing on, we said, Behei Nivra Olam Hazeh, the Yud Nivra Olam Haba, right? Where the Yud, he created the future, the world to come. Ubehei Olam Hazeh. Now he's just pointing out in this piece that we learned today, that Hey, which we're speaking about, with which he created Olam Hazeh, is not the Hey of Bina. It's the second Hey.
Right.
So why then are we talking about the first one, right? Yud K. It says, but Yud K Tzur Elohim. He's resolving a contradiction. Another passage said, but Yud K Tzur Elohim. With the Yud and the Hey, he created all the worlds. Well, the actual instantiation of the creation is not with the Yud K, it's the Hey at the last letter.
Right.
So he says, well, okay, how do we resolve that? Because the second Hey is a derivative of the first Hey. The source of Malchus, what Malchus has in common with its source, is the first Hey, and it has a commonality of expression in the second Hey. So that's why he's clarifying here what appears to be a contradiction. Yud K, with the Yud K he created all the worlds. Well, wait a minute. With speech he created all the worlds, right? With Malchus he created all the worlds.
Right.
So there has to be a relationship between those two, and the relationship is that the first, Bina, is a source for the second.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That's a good question. No, and that's
So could you say that
Mhm.
the first aspect is in thought and the second aspect is in, I mean, for lack of a better word, in action? Speech is also
Sure.
action.
Sure. Yeah, speech is, Through this part, you're absolutely right. Speech is one of the three garments of the soul. And Bina is not a garment of the soul, right? So yeah, there's action, which is the action is now this is the same metaphor, right? We think that's inside us, and then we bring it into externality through speech. So the speech is the externalization, or you're calling it the action, and the hasaga, the understanding, is the internal. But on contrary to a lot of people who may speak without thinking, you really need to think in order to speak, in order to speak things that are constructive or meaningful. Was noch? Anything else? That's a good word. Think before you speak. That's a begin. Any other begins? And any other questions?
Well, I was thinking that with Bina, and then it starts in the intellect, and then it goes to the spheres, which are the emotions, and ends up in speech.
Yes.
So we have
Correct.
to think about what emotions are coming out of our speech.
Yeah,
Part of hanging on to what you said.
absolutely. Shikayach. We'll see you tomorrow.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You're well.